Okay, this next story in a fine and pleasant misery is called The Backyard Safari. City planners have showed beyond doubt that old orchards, meadows, and pine woods, which once threatened the outskirts of many of our towns and cities, can be successfully eradicated by constructing a house development on top of them. To my knowledge, there has not been a single reoccurrence of an old orchard, meadow, or pine woods after one application of housing development. Housing developments are a great boon to camping, since they make such fine places to get away from. At the same time, however, many of them are so designed that they are destroying one of the most exotic forms of camping known to man, the backyard safari. Housing developments, or the requirements for a backyard safari, are few: a kid, a sleeping bag, and a backyard. The backyard is essential to the sport, and it saddens me that some developers have seen fit to phase it out. I personally don't sleep out in the backyard much anymore. Oh, occasionally my wife will forget that I'm spending an evening out with my boys, and through some gross oversight, will remove the secret outside key from the geranium pot. An intimate association with slugs, night crawlers, and wandering dogs with terminal halitosis no longer holds the fascination for me it once did. And the ground has become much harder in recent years. Nevertheless, there are those persons, mostly under the age of 10, for whom the backyard at night is still wilderness. A Mount Everest, a North Pole, and an Amazon, all rolled up into a 75-foot square patch of lilacs and crabgrass. There are two distinct forms of sleeping out: with Fred, John, etc., and alone. Both consist mainly of lying awake at night in the backyard. Otherwise, they resemble each other about as much as hunting quail with a 12-gauge does to shooting tigers with a blowgun. At the age of 7, I gained easy mastery over sleeping out with, even though my first attempt was marred by monumental miscalculation. We decided to sleep in his backyard rather than mine. By daylight, the two backyards were separated by about a quarter-mile of countryside, laced with barbed wire fences. At night, the distance was upwards of 10 miles, laced with barbed wire fences, and populated by scores of creatures not yet known to science. It should be noted that the aftermath of the harrowing experience of that first night, I could remember distinctly the features of several weird, hairy creatures that flitted past, but not recollect having passed through, over, and under a single barbed wire fence. Vern, my camping buddy, and I snuggled down to our foot-high pile of quilts, comic books, and assorted edibles, and we were well on our way to spending a pleasantly adventurous night out under the stars. Then it got dark. Sometime between 9 p.m. and midnight, I became convinced that the forces of darkness were conspiring to terminate my existence. I emerged from beneath the quilts and prepared to hurl my body into the abyss of night, informing Vern that I had suddenly recalled some urgent business at home that cried out for my immediate attention. He took the news badly, since he had no experience in sleeping out alone and had no intention of gaining any until he was about 47. His argument for my staying was fierce and brilliant, but it couldn't hold a candle to the pure and hard logic of a wavering screech, which was at that moment drifted out of the nearby woods. Neighbors said later that they'd noticed a terrible smell of burned rubber hanging in the air the next day. But I think they were exaggerating. Melting the soles of a pair of tennis shoes just doesn't smell that bad. Sleeping out with allows for a certain degree of sloppiness and haphazard good fellowship, but alone is all serious business, fraught with craft, skill, and ritual. Some great writers have suggested initiation into the manhood has something to do with getting your first gun, deer, bear, drink of whiskey, or some other first, but they are wrong. The true initiation of manhood consists of sleeping out alone in your backyard for the very first time. You can almost always recognize a kid who had just completed this ritual. There will be a slight swagger in his gait, a new firmness in his jaw, and he will be old and wrinkled and have white hair. The first step to sleeping out alone is to select just the right spot on which to spend the night. If it is too close to your house, you will draw such taunts as, "Albert is spending the night on the back stoop." And on the other hand, the sleeping spot should not be so far from the house that the distance cannot be covered in less than 2 seconds starting from prone position. An imaginary straight line extends from the sleeping spot to the back door of the house. This line should be cleared of all obstacles, hoses, lawn chairs, tall blades of grass, and if one has a dog, then he should be tied or locked up well before the night, in order to prevent his slipping in under cover of darkness and surreptitiously depositing a new obstacle on the escape route. Dogs have also been known to fall asleep directly in the bee line, as it is sometimes called. Once, while traveling at a high rate of speed, I collided with my old dog Strange under such circumstances. The result was multiple bites on the legs, neck, head, and hindquarters. But after a good deal of rest and medication, he managed to pull through. Choice of sleeping gear is largely a matter of preference. Most youngsters prefer to sleep with all their clothes on, although some find it more comfortable to wear only their underwear and shoes. Blankets on an old mattress have the advantage over sleeping bags of being easier to eject from in an emergency. Mummy-type sleeping bags should be avoided, since a stuck zipper may force one to run completely encased in a bag. While by no means impossible, running under such a handicap will cut one's speed nearly in half. Another hazard is that mothers have been known to faint and fathers to screech out strange obscenities at the sight of a mummy bag suddenly bounding into the house. On a youngster's first attempt at sleeping out alone, the considerate family usually waits up and throws him a little welcome home party shortly before midnight. If the sleeper out is unprepared for such a reception, he will probably enter the kitchen fully accelerated and wearing the expression of a person possessed of the knowledge that he is being closely pursued by something large and hairy. Under these circumstances, it is best if the parents avoid leaping out of hiding places and yelling, "Surprise!" The youngster will probably recover from the shock, but the kitchen may not. In any case, the parents will be creating some distasteful and unnecessary work for themselves. The 8-year-old who takes it upon himself to sleep alone in the backyard, 9 times out of 10, harbors in his heart some hope of one day becoming a mountain man or maybe a cowboy. Everyone knows that the ability to sleep outside is a prerequisite for both professions. Also, one may wish to squelch once and for all the suspicion among his peers and siblings that he is chicken. There is nothing that so assaults a man's self-respect as to have an older sister spread the rumor around the neighborhood that her little brother has a gizzard. Thus the sleeper out who suddenly decides the better part of valor is to get the heck inside the house as quickly as possible may want to assume some sort of protective coloration, if for no other reason than to hide his ruffled feathers. The wise youngster, therefore, will decelerate abruptly at the back door, compose himself, and enter in his abode with a bearing that exudes dignity, calmness, and self-assurance. He must then be prepared to undergo a certain amount of friendly but mischievous interrogation concerning the reasons for his premature return. Should he be so unsophisticated as to give his actual reasons, he is likely to receive some such response as, "Well, that's strange. I don't recall ever seeing a grizzly bear in the backyard before. A few mountain lion tracks among the alzayas, maybe, but no grizzly bear." Consequently, it is best to have a few plausible answers worked out well in advance, such as, "I thought I smelled smoke and rushed in to wake the family," or, "I nearly forgot, but I'm expecting an important phone call this evening." The night I slept out alone successfully for the first time was probably typical for such undertakings, except it was rather long and about equal in length to the time required for the rise and fall of the Roman Empire. The only part of me that slept at all that night was my right hand, and that only because it was wrapped so tightly around a baseball bat. Several times off in the distance, an ant coughed. The night dragged on. A pack of wolves circled my camp. Darkness embraced the earth. An axe murderer passed through the backyard on his way to work. Where is the sun? I thought. It must be nearly dawn. A siren sounded faintly in the distant town. The 10 o'clock curfew. I had been sleeping out alone for 45 minutes. I sniffed the air for smoke, hoping that the house might be burning down, and I could rush in to save the family. I was expecting an important phone call, but we had no phone. Inside the house, I knew my sister, the troll, lay awake listening for the thunder of my footsteps on the porch. She was sorting and polishing her hoard of chicken phrases. I slouched back down into the saddle of myself and grimly roll against the night.